spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna light it up tonight. We gonna light it up tonight. We gonna light it up just like the sunrise. We gonna light it up now.
Welcome to the HVAC Guide for Homeowners live show where we go through all things HVAC that no one else is talking about, answering your questions live. Sometimes we are joined by other pros in the chat who might know answers to questions that I don't. And finally, we have breakout segments where we go over funny clips, industry news, and goofy inventions. And not only that, tonight we have a special guest. When I started making YouTube videos and this live show, my biggest goal was to give folks access to see and be a part of things they can get nowhere else. And tonight is another great example of that. But before we bring on Tony, let's take a moment to pay the bills and thank the sponsor of this show. I wanted to take a quick break from the video and thank the sponsor of this video, AeroSeal. Leaky ductwork is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, energy wasters in most homes in the United States. And my favorite way of fixing that problem is AeroSeal. They'll come into your home, they'll test your ductwork and how leaky it is, they'll seal all the ductwork with a machine, and then they'll test it again and make sure that you got what you paid for. Customers have reported a significant savings on their energy bills after using AeroSeal. I'll put a link down in the description of this video. Thanks again to AeroSeal, and now let's get back to the video. Tonight's guest might be the smartest person we've ever had on our show. His content and his YouTube channel called HVAC TV shows another side of the HVAC industry with videos that are educational content on many different commercial HVAC topics. He's a highly experienced engineer with over 25 years of mechanical and sales experience and is currently the technical sales and marketing director at Insight Partners, a company known for their commercial HVAC network. In addition to his YouTube channel, he's also host of the Engineering HVAC podcast. Everyone, please welcome Tony Mormino. Let's go. What's up, Tony? How are you?
Oh, man, I am not worthy of that introduction. Thank you so much. I'm doing well this evening, and thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you taking time out. I'm a big fan. I think I told you that earlier. I sometimes watch your content. I'm actually teaching an A2L class, and I remember watching one or two of your videos because you've had some pretty smart folks on your channel. And, trying to learn the ins and outs of this stuff, all these changes we've got coming down the pike. I don't know. Let's start with that. What's the deal, man? We're phasing out all these horrible global warming refrigerants, and what's the future hold as far as that goes? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So this is I think the third transition I've been through since I started. In the beginning, it was, see if you could charge it or something. In the beginning, excuse me, my light went out. My son's helped me. So in the beginning, when I first started, it was, our industry reacts to the environmental pressures of the world, right? Like, so we don't get to make the decisions, but we get to live with the decisions. So in the beginning, it was all about the ozone layer, chlorine, right? CFCs, got to get rid of the chlorine because the chlorine molecules attacks the ozone layer. The ozone is 3 oxygen molecules. Anyway, so we got rid of all that. Now the whole thing is about global warming potential, and global warming is where there's an atmosphere we have, which is good because some of this heat from the sun comes here, it radiates off the earth, it keeps us warm. If you get too much of that, the theory is we get too warm and the temperatures rise, etc. So that's the theory behind the global warming. Some of the refrigerants have more of a global warming potential than others. And what that means is they hang out in the atmosphere longer. Okay, so like 410A has a global warming potential of 2022, I think, and the new ones coming in have to be under 700 GWP. So that's kind of what's running that whole deal there. So, and we get to respond to it, whether we like it or not. It's not like we get a lot of comments. I'm sure you do too. This is, whatever, and the EPA this and this is that, and I'm not going to about it. But, we're kind of like, as industry experts, we're required to educate people. We just actually had 4 techs get certified through ESCO for A2L certification. So that's kind of what's going on. It happens all the time. It's going to happen another 10 years if we're still around, and it'll just keep on happening. That's the deal.
Yeah, I've got a friend that I've done some YouTube content with, and he lives in the UK, and they're already phasing down or phasing out some of the refrigerants that the US is looking at introducing. So we're always late to the party. We're always last in line with some of these things, which, I mean, full transparency, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think it's nice to see other folks be guinea pigs before we try things, especially when some refrigerants are flammable, but or mildly flammable. But it's still interesting to see how they're already on the next step, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, we tend to lag behind, so there's something else coming, that's for sure. And I wish that the HVAC professionals, the people who live with this stuff, were more involved in the decisions that are made around this, and we're just not. My friend works for one of the large manufacturers, and he is in charge of governmental affairs. So all the big companies have a person who's responsible to go to Washington. They talk to the attorneys, they talk to the EPA. He says, when I go to a meeting in Washington to talk about this stuff, there's 12 lawyers and 1 engineer. Like, that's how these decisions are made. There's not a lot of engineering behind them. There's not a lot of practicality behind them in terms of pure engineering. I'm not talking about the environmental aspects of it, but yeah.
It's just crazy. I mean, I think we could probably spend the entire show on things to come, and I will say, so I've gotten fairly familiar with our side of when I say our side, I'm drawing a line tonight, Tony. I'm on the residential side and you're on the commercial side. So our side here, the good side,
Right.
the good side, I've gotten fairly familiar with where we're going with things, with the left-handed threads on the refrigerant tanks, right, and a lot of the other changes that we see coming. What's it like on your side? I mean, are y'all seeing the same sort of things, or is there a difference there?
No, I think it's all the same. The technician, I'm more on the engineering and sales side, so I'm not involved in the technician aspect of it, but I do know about the left-handed threads. I do know a lot of the equipment has to be A2L certified or approved, or I don't know what the exact word is, but that kind of stuff, we see a lot of scare tactics going on there. There's basically 2 viable replacements for 410A. And I've been through this with some of the big manufacturers too. Some companies take a side. They say, well, our low GWP is better than this low GWP. Now, we rep companies that have both refrigerants, right? So we're kind of agnostic to it. And I have just learned, like, if someone's saying this one's better than the other one, all they have is this one, like, right? All they have is this one, particular refrigerant. But yeah, I think it's the same. I think we're facing the same things you are. Education, building codes is a big thing. Commercial building codes all have to be updated because of the A2L ASHRAE classification of the refrigerant. So probably a lot of the same stuff you're dealing with.
Yeah, it's crazy. And we've already so I'm now work for a distributor, so I do all the training there, and we've seen things change literally within the last 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Meaning, now you may have already been ahead of the curve and you already knew this, but all the training material I was receiving was going through, the red stripes on the the refrigerant tanks and the left-handed threads and all these things we see coming. And a part of that literature also showed red stripes on the recovery tanks. And
Yep.
Hudson, the one of the big, companies that a lot of the wholesalers do their tank swaps with, came back and said, at least for now, that's not, so the point here is things are just constantly on the change here. It's, just constantly being mended, and it's almost, hard to keep up with.
It's
At
happening so
times.
fast. It's like, not this January, but the January before is when I started like, okay, I do the online content and stuff for our company. I better get educated on these A2Ls. I'll tell you, I Googled that for 3 weeks and I was more confused than when I started, like what was happening with it, like what it actually was. So finally, I did what I should have done in the beginning is I reached out to some of the experts that, you've seen on our show. And I'm like, man, could you spend a couple hours with me and go through this? And so that's the best advice I have is find an expert. You find someone you could talk to online. That's even better. You've got content. I'm sure we got content on the YouTube channel, but yeah, it's happening so fast and there's so many questions. And it's just like, it's part of the reason is because you mentioned we're late to the party. Like the rest of the world's been doing this. What happened is some of the states, because we chose not to do it, some of the states said, well, we're going to do it our own way. And now you had all these different states making their own regulations. And so the manufacturers went to the EPA and said, hey, y'all got to straighten this out. Like we can't make 5 different chillers and 6 different types of rooftops. So that's why it's a big scramble right now to catch up. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Tony, what's a chiller? I'm in residential. I'm in residential. You're using all these crazy words now.
If you have a house with a chiller, you're doing pretty well. Let's just say that.
I know, right?
Right.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to stop for a second. I've seen a lot of great questions, guys, in the chat, and we are going to take some questions tonight. But I do want to let you know we're not going to be able to get to all the questions. And so what I'm going to do is, in addition to, because we've got back-to-back shows, we've got some amazing guests coming up over the next couple weeks. And so I'm going to this Saturday morning, I'm going to do our traditional question and answer show. So just stay tuned on that. So again, feel free to drop questions, especially if you have questions for Tony. But I'm not going to be able to get to all of the questions that we're seeing pop up in the chat, especially the specific ones like, hey, I've got this going on in my house. What do I do to fix that? It's going to be tough for us to get through all of that tonight. And I want to respect Tony's time. He's taking time out to hang out with us and share us the long, the skinny. I used to have a boss that would call it the skinny. And
That's right.
so he's sharing us the skinny. So
yeah.
So you work for, I believe the company's called Insight Partners. Is that right? Is that what they're called?
Yep. Insight Partners. Yes.
Okay. So what exactly, because I went to their website and I've got more questions than answers. What exactly do they do? What's their mission in all of this?
So what we are is a commercial HVAC rep firm. So Insight Partners is a HVAC rep firm in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And we sell major manufacturers. I think we have up to 60 manufacturers on our line card. So Aon is one of our big ones. Armstrong, LG, Samsung, commercial HVAC. That's what we're focused in. Marley cooling towers, products like that. Yeah. So we primarily call on mechanical engineers and we help them with their designs and specifications, their plans and specifications. And we also call on mechanical contractors and try to sell them equipment. That's what we do. Yeah.
So I think that's awesome. And I'm sure, they do all kinds of awesome things, but I'm just a little, I guess, let me say it this way.
Mhm.
What is the motivation behind Insight? I mean, other than, the goodness of y'all's heart to educate others, where did the idea for the YouTube channel and podcast and educating this country, if not the world, come about if you guys are so regional?
Yeah, that's a great question. And It's been crazy how it happened, honestly. So when COVID hit, I don't know, how long has it been now? 3 years? A couple of years now, right?
Yeah, time's flying.
So our chief, avatar in marketing term, like our core customer are the mechanical engineers and mechanical contractors. And we do well when we're in front of them a lot, right? So let's just talk about like before COVID, before all this online stuff happened for us. Our ideal is to be in front of the engineers and contractors as much as we can, building the relationships, taking them to lunch. Some guys like to go golfing. Some guys like me like to go into their office and teach about engineering principles. We're going to teach about psychrometrics. We're going to talk about dehumidification, how to specify a VRF system, 2-pipe versus 3-pipe. So just the general HVAC stuff, types of fans. When COVID hit, that all stopped because we couldn't get in their office and see people. So we were like everybody else, how are we going to get in front of folks? So, I got a call, I think, from somebody I work with said, hey, we need to get on Skype. We need to get on Skype to see everybody. I'm like, Skype, does that still exist? I said, why don't we try this Zoom thing? I think that's more popular. So we started getting on Zoom. And when it first hit, at least for like B2B businesses like us, when we started doing online Zoom education, it was insane. It was like 300 or 400 people there every week. We do a show. It was like nutso, but that dove down. People got so sick of that. Like, I'm so sick of these Zoom we call them webinars. Anyway, that's kind of where it all started. My boss knew I had a little bit of online experience, so he asked me to help with that. And I said, sure, I'll be glad. Any way I could help, I'm glad to help. And we did that. And then LinkedIn Live came out about the same time and said, hey, why don't we do one on LinkedIn Live? And we were like completely shocked. People are actually watching us on LinkedIn, but it's cool. Like no one else was doing it. People were like, oh, this is a show for us mechanical engineers. So it was really neat. And then that kind of morphed into YouTube. And then the podcast is this is a hilarious story. So my boss comes to me after we're doing this a couple months. He goes, I heard this podcast in LA, a couple guys doing commercial HVAC. Why don't we start one? I was like, I can't think of a bigger waste of time. Who's going to listen to HVAC, commercial HVAC stuff on a podcast? And so that went for about a week or two. And then I saw one of my competitors was starting a podcast. And I was like, oh man, I can't let them get in front of us. So I started one anyway. We were shocked that people like to listen to this. That's kind of how it all started. Then I'm totally addicted to this HVAC marketing online. Like that's all I think about. I love it. Like that's why I agreed to do this. So it just blew up into that. So that's kind of how it all got started.
Yeah, I think that social media and just YouTube especially, but podcasting too, has really given folks access to more information than ever. I mean, that probably goes without saying, but if we go back 10, 20 years ago, even when the internet was already around, you could read some blogs, you could go to a few websites, but now you get to find, someone you actually trust, right? You find a Tony that, man, I like this guy. He's shooting me straight here and he's teaching me some stuff in addition to, telling me what product maybe he likes. And, it's really given us a chance to, not just HVAC, all kinds of industries, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really neat to see how that's just kind of evolved there.
Yeah, and it's funny, and I know you know this because I watch your content as well. But it's like the more you give away, the more you try to make your customers more successful, the more you're successful. It's the opposite of what you would think intuitively. You're like, we got to sell, we got to convert, that stuff's important too, no doubt. But like to build your brand and to stay top of mind, like that's our online goal, to build our brand and to stay top of mind. We always want to be in front of people. The best way to do that is provide content that brings value, right? Like brings value to your intended audience. If you're doing that, you do build the trust and you build the audience. That's why we do it. It's marketing at its best, in my personal humble opinion. But.
Yeah, I like it. I've got a question from the chat. Ryan says, if money was not an issue, what type of system would you put in your own house? Communicating inverter, 2-stage, or single stage, and why? And do you have a brand preference?
So I'm a big fan of VRF for residential if you've got the money, right? Like that's the biggest thing. My kind of philosophy on the home is like I get asked this question all the time. And my first question is to them, like, what's your goal, right? Like, are you trying to be green? Is comfort your goal? Are you trying to lower your utility bill, which sometimes is different objective than trying to be green, right? Like if you're just trying to be green, I say start with your, like don't buy more home than you need. That's first, you know what I mean? Like, don't buy a huge home if you don't need one, because it doesn't matter. You're going to spend anyway. If your intent is to be green and have a lower carbon footprint and all that stuff. I'm a big fan of VRF if you could afford it, because it's very efficient. It's very quiet. You can put one in each room. It's expensive. I have a mini VRF system in my basement here. We have a 3-to-1 kind of deal. And then I have a conventional split system upstairs. So, and I don't have a brand. There's a lot of good brands. I would just say, make sure it's a recognizable brand. There's probably 3 or 4 big guys out there, and I would say probably one of them.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, if you do go to the VRV or VRF route, is finding someone that knows how to work on it.
100%.
If you live in the backwoods of Indiana, and you only have 3 contractors to call on, and none of them have ever even laid eyes on a VRV or a VRF. I mean, I think they're amazing too. I put one in my brother-in-law's house, but if you don't have anybody that knows how to work on it, I wouldn't want to be the guinea pig either. It's kind of,
we're in that exact situation here, because we're up in the mountains, this small city up here. I'm a HVAC guy. Like, I know everybody, and it's hard to find someone to work on it was hard to find someone to install it too. So yeah, great advice. I didn't think of that part.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it's worth mentioning, because I'll get people comment on my stuff, because Tony, I'm not so politically correct. Most of these guys know that I'll tell them which brands I hate and which ones I like, and they'll message me and they'll say, well, I know you mentioned said brand, but I can't even find a contractor in my area that even sells that brand. And I tell them, well, then why do you want that brand? Why would you want to be their guinea pig? You need to find a good contractor and go with what they recommend. So
100%.
What does a day look like for you?
So I get up usually 4:30 to 5:30, depending on when my brain wakes me up. I have no control over it. I just get up, bang, my mind's going 100 miles an hour. So I like to kind of take it slow in the morning. I have some coffee. I do some prayer. I do some reading. I kind of relax and get my mind settled. I do a to-do list. After, a little while of that, I'll get on, do some emails. I'll head to the office. Usually it's centered around content creation. Like tomorrow we have a podcast we have to launch, or we have to release. And then I also have a podcast I'm recording, a guy's coming on and talking about, how AI is starting to change the HVAC industry, which is a whole other, we could have an hour-long show on that. Like, that's been exciting. But that's basically it. When I'm in the office, it's meetings, doing stuff like this, doing podcasts, hosting a podcast, editing videos. We do all of our stuff in-house. Like, we're kind of rare. We're kind of almost like more of a media company than we are a marketing group inside the marketing group. So that's what a typical day looks like for me.
Nice. Yeah. 4:30. My goodness. God bless you.
Yeah. When I told my wife I was doing this podcast at 8:30, they're like, "Oh, they don't know you." Like, no, this is fine.
Yeah. So, we are cutting into your bedtime. I'm sorry.
No, you're not at all. I go to bed at 10, so you're good.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. So you part of your job is content creation. I think that's a pretty cool job. I would sign up for that all day long. Ryan says, how is AI changing HVAC? Any examples on the residential side that you know of yet?
I do not. I'll ask the guest coming on tomorrow. We use it primarily in marketing. There's something called GPT Chat, which is a great assistant writing tool. And then there's some video editing things to use. There's also, like, for this podcast, you could take the transcript, you could dump it into a program, and it could help you write a blog post out of the content we do here today. So there's a lot of amazing tools like that for marketing. I know the guy who's coming on tomorrow, he has a tool that will read plans and specifications and give you a summary of what's in the specs, what it says, the key points. There's pretty amazing stuff out there, but I don't know from a residential standpoint. Josh, do you have any experience with that? Or?
Well, so I don't know if you read through the potential questions that went on my email that I sent you, but the 10th one is always, we have a goofy invention segment. Did you see that?
Yeah, I sure did. Yeah.
Now you don't have to share it right now, but did you come up with one?
I did, but it doesn't have anything to do with AI. But
okay, perfect. So I ask that because one of my goofy inventions one week was I talked about how, you know, how some of these mini splits have this eye that can see you in the room, right? And it'll split the air so it's not blowing directly on you. It's kind of a neat technology.
Nice.
Or it can see hot spots in the room and blow the air towards that, or whatever it does. So the AI technology that I came up with, or you know, goofy invention, we need to patent this and both become very wealthy, is if AI could see you in the room using thermal technology and say, oh, before you even have to adjust the temperature, Tony's getting pretty warm in here. He's smoking hot. Let's turn up the AC.
I
You
love it.
know, I think that,
I think you could do that. I don't think it would be that hard.
yeah, I mean, since the humidity, since the temperature, oh, I bet he's a little uncomfortable. Bang, you know, and that was my, as you
That's
can tell,
good.
some of the inventions aren't quite as goofy as the Snuggie, where you just put sleeves on a blanket and become a millionaire, apparently. But
Hey, keep it simple, baby. I love it. That's like the perfect air conditioning system. No moving parts. Like that's the perfect one. If you could find that, get it.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
So I know we were talking about how you do every now and then you get to go do a site visit. You try to get out there as much as you can. What does that normally entail? Are you doing site visits because there's something wrong, or
Sometimes they range anywhere from we're going to record owner training, or I just happen to be invited and I'm getting some video of our controls guys putting in the controls. Then I'll do an interview with them like, hey, why use Insight Controls? What is this application? What's important to the engineer to know, the contractor? And then there's some I'll go out here where there's problems on a job. We had the weirdest thing. Like you had something on your list too about the craziest stuff you see or something like that. And we had a contractor call us. Our unit, we had a 50-ton package unit, and it was just had 1,000 bugs in it, like past the 6 inches of filters, past the cooling coil, all over the place. And I'm like, well, how did they bypass? You know, so we're thinking like we're spending days out there, job site visits. All right, let's clean this unit out, tighten it up, and then we'll see what happens. So I went out there. The guy said they cleaned it out, the contractor. I'm like, this is not clean, guys. There's still bugs everywhere. So we got a shop vac and we got on the ladder and we got out there. We got some old jeans out there for like 6 hours with the shop. I mean, there's videos of us like in there getting all dirty. But that's the stuff I need to do every once in a while because I need to remember, like, you know what I mean? I need to get my hands on it, like even from a marketing standpoint. So that's one type of job site visit, which doesn't happen very often, but I kind of cherish it. Turns out, in my opinion, the way all those bugs in there, someone left the door open before the unit was started up. And it was it was the season and they got, because well, how else would they get past 6 inches of filters and a 6-row cooling coil and a hot gas recoil after it. So all that stuff, and there was bugs. Anyway, that's another way I visit jobs. That was fun.
you get there and they're like, oh, it's clean. And you're like, no, it's not. So you go and grab the shop vac and you're like, I got all dressed up. I had a big meeting after this, and there you are cleaning bugs out of a unit, all dressed up, you know?
Yeah, you got to get in there and get your hands dirty every once in a while. But I look for those opportunities because it's a lot of fun. And now there's a bet. So the contractor, I'm telling him, look, I think someone left this door open. That's how the bugs. He's like, I don't think so. And I said, well, we'll find out next spring. So coming up here in a couple months, I'll report back to you if there's bugs in there or not. So
I think it's funny sometimes when we're dealing, because I'm now in my new role having to deal with some of that, and I'll tell the contractor what my theory on certain things is, and like you just pointed out, and they'll be like, "No, there's no way, you're crazy," So,
and it's usually the simplest thing, right? Like it's usually we want to look for, what is the phrase you hear? Horse hooves, but you look for zebras or something like that. I don't know. Heather can correct me. I saw Heather works with me, and she's going to correct me in the chat here, I'm sure. But
what kind of sayings are you North Carolina people coming up with? What was that?
I got that from a guy from Buffalo, so I don't know. It's traveled.
That's funny. I used to work with an old farmer one time, and it was one of my first jobs in high school. And I don't even want to tell you some of the things he had me do, but it made me willing to get my hands dirty pretty quick. But anyway, he would always have these weirdest sayings. He'd always be like, that's why that, what they say, the milk don't fall far from the cat whiskers, and just these weird, and I'd be like, what?
That's funny. Oh man.
So, I want to switch gears. I've been asking you a little bit about your site visits and the things you do at Insight. Let me ask you about your podcast and your YouTube channel. What
Hmm.
would the ideal, like, is there like a Michael Jordan or is there somebody you would love to have on your show and you
Ooh.
haven't yet?
Well, you haven't been on there yet, so you're top of the list.
Oh
I'd love
yeah,
to
come
have you
on,
on the
man.
show. No, man, I'm serious. I don't know. We get a lot of great guests on our show. Sometimes in our industry, the commercial side, it's actually hard to get people to come on our show. We're kind of dinosaurs in the marketing world. I tell people all the time because I'm on all the platforms. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Insta. I'm not on all of them, but most of them, I'd say. And residential HVAC is dominating in terms of like HVAC folks online, like doing this deal, like stuff you're doing. You're way ahead of the commercial side. Like we're like B2B in general in marketing is a dinosaur, but HVAC B2B, we're like the oldest dinosaur. We're not even like within the young. We're not even the cool dinosaurs yet. But so I can't remember I can't remember what you asked me. But so
What
yeah.
who your
Oh,
ideal
who would the
guest would
guest?
be?
So I'm not sure. I like having. I would like to have some more mechanical engineers on the podcast, even though it's geared towards mechanical engineer. We don't have that many practicing. We have 2 coming on Thursday that are
Nice.
from California, so I'm excited about that. I would like to have more CEOs of companies come on there that we rep. We had some high level folks on there a few weeks ago. That's always a lot of fun. But I can't think of a particular name right now. I don't know.
Yeah.
What about you? You got one on your list?
That's I hit you with that question and I hadn't even thought of it myself. I'm actually really enjoying um having some so I've had some high level executives come on our show and
Hmm.
it's like I I'm humbled because it's weird because if you go back 3 to 5 years ago, I was still just a, lowly guy. I had a couple employees and I got really good at fixing air conditioners, but fast forward to today, had I never recorded a single video, that's still who I would be. I might
Mm.
have a few more employees, but I'd still be a guy that fixes air conditioners. So it's just always kind of cool to have honestly guys like you and some of the other folks that we've had on our show just to kind of, I don't know, in a way kind of rub elbows with some of these folks and that, that's been kind of cool just in general. Um, yeah,
That's awesome. It is amazing to me how this stuff can happen just from a couple things. Like I remember the first time I turned the camera on, I did a live show, and I was like, first of all, I was absolutely petrified. Like I am not a natural at this. It's come with. I told my friend was on our podcast or on a podcast with me a few weeks ago, and afterwards he texted me. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm already thinking about this, and I should have said this, and I should have done that." I said, "Don't worry, that goes away after episode 101." So that's, you know what I mean? Like that's how it's been for me. But yeah, it's funny how when you start doing this stuff, how it just kind of, if you're authentic and you want to help people and you're really trying to give back, it just kind of takes on a life of its own. It's really cool.
yeah. Do you ever? So there's this, and I'm sure it bleeds over in your industry too, but maybe in a different way. And I say your industry, I mean in commercial.
Hmm.
I so there's this thing with residential. There's this overall stigma, I don't know, dark horse or what, I don't know the exact verbiage, but there's guys in our industry that make us look bad, right? And so sometimes I get in trouble on my YouTube channel because I'll call guys out. Like I've honestly I've made some enemies since I've started this channel. I've called a few folks out. I've
Yep.
if they did me wrong with my contracting business, then I would call them out nationally on my YouTube channel, kind of thing. Right or wrong, mature or not. It's just kind of what I've done. So have you experienced any of that? Have you had to bite your tongue a few times on something?
A few, not many, but I know exactly what you're talking about because I see it a lot, and I see people. If you're a residential HVAC guy, don't brag about ripping off some old lady about changing her capacitor or thermostat. Like I've seen stuff like that, and it makes my heart hurt. Just from
Yeah.
a general humanity standpoint and from an industry standpoint. Like that's we're not here to, well, whole different discussion. But like my goal is to serve. Like I want to serve my company. I want to serve our customers. Like that's kind of how I grew up. My dad was a residential HVAC guy, and I went on a lot of calls with my father, and I learned a lot of that from him. Hi, Joe Mormino, if you're watching, and Marie Mormino. My parents, they told me they're going to watch. I forgot to call them out.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Hey, Joe.
Yeah. So, I learned from that from my father, because he would go there and want to take care of people. And, he would cut him a break when, he was just a nice guy. He just wanted to help out. I also learned that, he took me up in some attics in Tampa, Florida, when I was in high school. And, he was always a big, like, you should go to college. And I'm like, I don't know. And then I went up in a couple of those attics. I'm like, I might want to check this college thing out,
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with like, we've done a ton of shows too on, my son's probably going to go in the trades. Like I'm a big believer in if you go in the trades, go in the trades, don't fall into, you got to go to college to be successful. That's a bunch of BS in my opinion. College is great too. I went to college, but like, don't look past the trades, which if that's what you want to do and that fits your style, that's a good deal. But yeah, the thing online, I preach about that all the time too. I'm like, guys, let's lift each other up. Like one of the things I hate too is when I see a new guy on there. He's obviously starting out. He says he's starting out. Look, I'm new. I want to share this thing that I'm trying to learn. And then they just pick them apart. Like you're a dumb A. You should have do this. You're doing that wrong. I'm like, hey man, keep learning, keep going. And I'm like trying, and I get comments too, because I'll be like, guys, why don't you lay off the kid? He's trying to learn. He's trying to teach. You know what I mean? It's like, what are we doing here? It's just not cool, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm probably gonna get some comments here too, but whatever.
No, I think that's really good way to look at it. I'll tell you, I think there's two ways to look at that too. I'm totally with you. I'm totally on your side. At the same time, I've hired guys that, they would say, I can't handle this. I can't handle you saying things critical to me. And I'm like, you never would have made it very long with the guy I learned under, because that dude was making me cry on a weekly basis. I mean,
yeah.
There was no, they weren't worried about your feelings. They would give you the truth, like it or not. So there are people, so there's products or situations that you've bit your tongue on and you didn't talk about it on your channel. Now's a good time. Let's make a few enemies tonight. You just call them out and
well, I don't have any names, but in general, stop doing that stuff online. Let's build each other up, man, not tear each other down. That's the way I look at it. If the guy's doing it wrong, then message him, say, hey, just a heads up, you really don't want to do that. It's dangerous. Try it this way. You don't got to embarrass the kid in front of everybody.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I like that. Especially, it would be really good if there was a way that guys could post a picture of their latest install on social media and say, hey guys, what's something I could do better at? And get some actual true good feedback from some guys that know what they're doing. And man, that would go a long way for some folks, I think, I do that sometimes too. Like I'm not an expert in every aspect. Like,
I might see a duct design and I'm like, hey, this looks great. Can you guys give me some pointers? What would you do different? What is great about this? Or if I see somebody post something and there's a lot of comments like, wow, this is amazing. This looks great. I ask them, hey, what's so amazing? Because I'm trying to learn, because I don't know. I'm not a piping guy. I don't know a lot of that kind of stuff either, but it's a great tool. But I tell you, I learned stuff, and there's stuff where I kind of think I'm a little bit of an expert on, and I'll post it and they'll be like, actually, and then someone will say something. I'll be like, oh, you're probably right. That's probably not exactly right. So
yeah. Heather says definitely Gary V as a superstar guest.
So Heather is our brand manager. She works with me and she knows I'm a big like Gary V fan. So she's trying to make fun of me, I guess.
So Gary V, who is she?
Gary V is a Gary Vaynerchuk.
I know, I'm kidding. I'm saying that in case Gary ever sees this. I'll be like, Gary V, who is she?
Gary, where is Gary? Give us some love. Give us a comment or something here, man.
Yeah. To me, there's like nothing more disrespectful than to act like you don't know who they are, and then not even.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, who's Gary V?
That's right.
So what's some biggest misconceptions that you come across? Is there anything that you could point out that would be a huge misconception that would maybe help because I know you deal with a lot of commercial, but help a homeowner out?
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought a little bit about that. I think one of the things, and I'm sure you're familiar with, is not bigger is not always better when it comes to sizing your AC system in your home. So, a typical conversation I might have is, Tony, I've got this unit, it's 15 years old, it's 3 tons, but I think I'm going to go back with a 4.5 or a 5 ton. And I'm like, don't do that. Be careful. And I get a little history from them. And I'm like, look, it's probably just not cooling because it's old. That's one thing. And the danger in oversizing a system is you get something called short cycling, which I know you're familiar with. An AC system needs to run to take the humidity out of the air. And if it just comes on, cools the space down real fast and shuts off, it doesn't take the humidity out. So you end up with a space that's cool, but it's very humid. And it's really hard to come back from that if you get the wrong size system installed. So the best system to me is one that barely can keep up on a design day. And a design day happens 2% of the time a year. So a few days out of the year, if it's 95 degrees out and you can't get it down to 72, it's 76, it's okay. That to me is the best system because it's not oversized. It's just enough to get you some tempering on those. You know what I mean? So that would be probably the biggest misconception I would see. The other one was, let's see, what was the other one? That there was that one, and
While you think of it, I'm going to piggyback
go
off of
for it.
what you just said, and I want to also point out, I think that a lot of people, I think it's safe to say, it's easy for folks to realize, oh, well, you can oversize a system, and it doesn't run long enough. It doesn't remove enough humidity, right? And especially folks that have done their homework will know that. But the other thing I just kind of want to add to that too is how many days in the year are not peak days, right? There's so many mild days, and now you've got the system that was oversized even for a peak day, and you've got these mild days where this system is just really oversized. I mean, just
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just a thought sprung to mind.
No, that's a big thing in our industry too, is the part load days are what gets you. The full load's easy. Full load days are easy. It's the part load. And even in commercial HVAC, we see those problems all the time. So, you got to be very careful with when you're designing jobs, commercial or residential, to make sure the part load is taken care of. The other thing I was going to mention is heat pumps. I forgot about that for a minute. Like, there's a misconception that heat pumps don't work well in colder climates. Now, colder is a relative term. Here in the mountains, the design is like 8 degrees or maybe even 10 degrees. So we don't have extremely cold winters like they do up in Michigan. If you're getting into the low single digits once or twice a year, heat pump's going to be just fine for your home. So that's a misconception we see all the time. And heat pumps are nothing new. They've been around for over 100 years, actually. It mostly used in residential, I would say maybe the last 40, 50 years pretty regularly. I'm not really 100% sure on that, but so don't be afraid of heat pumps. That was my preach there. Now, if you're in an area that gets negative temperatures all the time, very often, then you want to look at maybe a gas heat pump with gas heat or just a gas heat unit.
Yeah, no, I like that. Something that as we see the industry move towards that, and there are states that are taking aim, at least in residential, at burning fossil fuels, and in some cases they're talking about banning furnaces entirely. I mean, that seems drastic at this point, but just to point out, I mean, I think it's really important to point out how far we've come, right? I mean, heat pumps, when I got in this industry, did kind of have this reputation of a very low heat rise and putting that hand over the vent, and it's kind of cool coming out of there in comparison. But man, they've come so far just in just a short amount of time.
Yeah, we have one down here, we have one in both systems in our home, our heat pumps, and they work just great all winter. We have a wood burning stove too, which really helps, but we could run the heat pumps without the stove and be just fine. So,
yeah, I like it. I mentioned a moment ago our goofy invention segment, and you said you might have one. I am curious to hear what it might be.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be as good as yours, and it's not at all related to HVAC. Well, I guess it is kind of indirectly, but like I have trouble. Like I love my job right now. I'm really excited about the content creation and all the possibilities online. I have a hard time shutting it off, to be honest with you. When I come home from work, I would love to have a button I'm going home, turn my brain off of HVAC marketing, and I come home, but I don't. So that would be my weird invention, and then I could get up in the morning and turn it back on when I need it. But there's that phrase like if you do what you love, you'll never have to work another day in your life. I'm sure you've heard that before, but I tell you, man, when you do what you love, it doesn't stop. Like it's hard to shut it off for me, for Tony anyway. So that would be my invention, a switch, brain switch.
I think Elon Musk, isn't he working on some sort of chip that you put in your head, and they might be closer to that than you think, being able to
you never know.
turn switches on and off with your brain.
See, my wife wouldn't let me get that though. If she's upstairs listening, she might shut me down. I gotta be careful here what I say. So she's a big conspiracy chip at the brain kind of thing. So
yeah. Yeah. My wife would probably say he only has 2 brain cells. Don't be flipping one off.
Right.
So what's one piece of advice you'd give your own family? If mom's looking for a new heating and air system, what's a piece of advice you would give her? What's your number one piece of advice?
Check really vet the installers. Cause like you said earlier, this stuff's getting more advanced. You got to make sure you have a person who can support it. The brands are pretty easy to vet. I think, I would give recommendations of 5 different brands, and, the installer is the hard part. There's Google reviews, which I think are really helpful. Word of mouth is extremely helpful. And then, let me see. Yelp has some reviews on there now for contractors I saw. So there's those 3 things. And then like in terms of the equipment, I would say find 3 contractors that are reputable, and maybe they're each probably going to give you a good, better, best scenario. Right. And I'm usually right in the middle, not the 14, 15C or not the 22, but maybe the 18-ish or something like that. And the thing that most homeowners forget is if you have an old system, like I still have a 22 system as one of mine. One of mine's new and one of them's an old 22, which needs to be replaced. So, one of the things owners forget is if they're even if they're going to like a 16C, or if they've got a unit that's really old, it's probably only 8C anyway. They're probably doubling you know what I'm saying? So to pay that extra money from the 18 to the 22 is probably not, the juice is probably not worth the squeeze there. Just my personal opinion, but I guess that would be my advice.
If mom's in the market for a heating and air system right now, are you telling her to BandAid it and wait for the new refrigerants? Or are you telling her, go ahead and take care of it because the new stuff's probably going to cost more anyway with all the extra hardware?
That's a tough call. I don't know. I'd have to see some numbers on that. I would not be afraid to BandAid it and wait. Like I just BandAided my 22 system and I'm waiting a little bit, but I would not be afraid of the new refrigerant units either. They're shipping now. You can get them now. I understand. So I don't know. I'm a big fan of, being in the commercial sales business. I've sold unit number 1 off the line before, or you know what I'm saying? Something new comes out and you sell it, and the manufacturers really do a good job of testing these, but until you get them in the field, you just don't know. So these are new machines. There are some new parts. Pressures are pretty similar, but they are a little bit different. My advice to engineers and owners in the commercial business is like, wait, let them get out there, let them get tested, but there's no time. You can't, because it ends this year for most of the commercial stuff and the residential too. So I'm a proponent of either or, depending on the pricing, I guess.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons. For the longest time, I would tell people, don't worry about waiting. We're still a year or 2 out, right? For the longest time, I was saying that. But I just recently did a video on maybe why you wouldn't wait or maybe why you would now wait, right? I mean, we're in the home stretch here, and maybe why, 410, it's probably going to do what R22 and R12 did. It's probably going to go up in price as it gets more scarce, I would assume. So maybe you might want to wait now, and get into a new system, but the prices are going to probably be a little higher on those. And you got all this extra hardware with these sensors, I don't know.
Do you take like the age of the equipment into account and then the cost to repair it versus the cost of a new one? Is that kind of how you do it?
Well, I think that there's exceptions to every rule. I think for me, age of the system has never really played a big role in it. Obviously, you're going to look at it, but I've certainly seen 8-year-old systems that look like they're 25 years old. And I've seen systems that are 15 years old that you're like, really? This thing is 15 years old? Wow, you've taken really good care of it. And I feel like that happens way too much, right? We talk about those
Yeah.
bad apples, and guys go into houses and the first thing they go to the homeowner is, it's time to buy a new system because you're at 13 years old now. Well, you haven't even
Right.
diagnosed it yet, man. Come on.
You haven't even looked at it. And the other thing I would say too, like I've thought a little bit about this too, is like if your goal is for energy efficiency, like if you want to go green, like I want to go green, I want to not just reduce my electric bill, but I want to be good for the environment, yada, yada, yada. Look at other stuff in your home first. Like how is the insulation? What are you doing for lighting? How are your windows? Because if your goal is to go green, and your envelope stinks, it doesn't matter what you put in, you're still wasting a lot of energy. So there might be low-hanging fruit items you could do because getting a new system, especially if you get like a new high efficiency VRF system, it can cost a lot of money. Like they're very expensive. So, insulation, windows, doors, you know what I'm saying? Just seal up the basic stuff.
Yeah. I tell you, I mean, that's another thing. You bring up building envelope, and these guys that specialize in, they call themselves building scientists. And, man, that wasn't even a thing a decade ago. Like these folks have really focused in on, if I'm going to make a serious investment here, I need to make sure I take care of some of these other problems around here, at least run a thermal camera through this house,
Yeah. Yeah, we see it in commercial too. It's the same thing that the HVAC is usually, pointed at, but like, dude, your building is leaking like crazy. Like it's not a tight building. It's an old building. It doesn't matter what you do with this HVAC, you're still going to have problems. So,
Tony, you might have opened a can of worms. I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but Shinobi One says, what companies are shipping systems with new refrigerants currently? Do you know the answer to that?
Well, one of the companies we rep is Bosch, and I know they're shipping residential units with the new refrigerant. I know of several commercial ones, but that won't help any homeowners. But Bosch, as far as I know, LG in their commercial is shipping with the new refrigerants. I don't know about their residential side. I would assume so, but I think are there not several other residential ones doing that now? Or
I don't know for a lot of the brands. So I don't want to say something that's untrue, but that
Gotcha.
would be news to me that there is unitary equipment that you can now. A lot of the brands that I keep up with, we're looking at Q3 for a lot of the, for us to actually get our hands on the equipment. It's,
Well,
they're
that's a
going to
good point. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there. I
No, you're
stepped
good.
over you there for a second, but like, yeah. So when I say shipping, a lot of the distributors still have warehouses full of 410A, so they might not be offering it. Is probably what you're seeing, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So
I gotcha.
One of my sponsors here on the YouTube channel, and actually the company that I work for distributes, is Daikin. And I know Q3 is when their single stage stuff is going to be rolled out. At least that's what they're saying. Timelines change. Do you know, since you brought up Bosch, do you know with their residential which refrigerant they're going with? Are they going with 454B, or are they going
I
with
believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe most of the folks are going with 454B. Daikin is 32 because I believe they manufacture R32, if I'm not mistaken. So that makes sense for them to do that. There are some that are going with R32, but most of the companies we rep are going with 454B. I think LG is doing 32 as well. I can't remember.
Gotcha.
I have a chart somewhere. It's so confusing, but yeah, we have companies that have both, so we're agnostic to it. I think they're both very safe refrigerants, honestly. And you've probably done stuff on the A2L aspect, the mildly flammable, and it's something to be aware of, and it's important, but it's nothing like propane. When you go to try to light these things, they're extremely hard to light. So.
I've gone through some other concerns on my channel recently, but I'll spare you the details at this point. But I've got a few other concerns with 454B that we'll see what happens. But anyway, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. I know one thing, it's a big pain in the butt for the manufacturers. It has not been a fun experience for them because
Yeah.
it's the A2L aspect of it changes a lot of the UL requirements. There's refrigerant leak detectors in there. There's new sequences when things go wrong. So it's a big pain for the manufacturers. So
Yeah, absolutely. And then they're going to have guys like me getting in there and putting tape over the sensor, you know. Do
we'll,
not put tape
we'll
over the
we'll
sensor,
clip
people.
that out of this. We'll clip that out of this show, right?
Do not put tape over the sensor, people.
Yeah, and do not put, A2L refrigerants in a 410A machine or vice versa, because you can
Oh,
get in
I
some
know.
serious trouble with that.
It's so funny you say that. So I've done probably about a dozen classes now on specifically the A2L refrigerants. And you would not believe I've had at least a handful of folks ask me in the class how they can cut corners. And,
Mm,
well, what if I'm only replacing the coil but I want to put the A2L in? I mean, just the oddest questions. And I'm like, I think you should do things correctly. I think you should be getting
mhm.
HRI matches. And I think if it's an A2L, you need to be making sure you're doing everything to code. And why don't we just do that? Why don't we do things correctly moving forward? Yeah.
Yeah,
I, so
it's not worth it to me. And I know, on the commercial side, like some of these 50-ton commercial units we sell, they're very for the real high tech ones, they're $80,000-$100,000. You put the wrong refrigerant in there, you void the warranty. I mean, it's that serious. Not to mention you could lose your license, and if God forbid anything happens, and it might not work. That's the other thing.
yeah.
So
Yep. Um, is there anything new that you're working on that you can mention? If there's something that you can't mention, maybe give us a little teaser, but is there anything new you're working on you can share?
yeah, sure. So we've got a lot of fun stuff going on. Most of it's in the commercial HVAC realm, but we've got a new podcast we're trying to launch in the Northeast. So we have what's called the Engineers HVAC podcast. So we're helping we have a family of brands. We have a company, and in that company, there's 12 different there's 12 different insight partners types companies. So in the Northeast, they do things a lot differently there. So we're helping them start their own podcast to educate engineers and contractors called the Northeast Engineers HVAC podcast. We've got that. And then we've got, I'll be doing a live show from a factory called Climate by Design in Owatonna, Minnesota next month. So that'll be tons of fun. We'll be doing this, but we'll be live on the factory floor, and we'll be talking about active desiccants, which is like a real low dew point air conditioning product for like lithium ion battery manufacturing and surgery suites. And my son, who's taking some HVAC classes, actually is going to go to that with me. So he's going to get to see that factory. So those are a couple things we're working on. Also, we've got 4 techs A2L certified today to teach contractors. So if you're in the Insight Partners or Hobbs and Associates HVAC rep firm area, please reach out to us, and we're glad to give away some training, teach you up.
I like it. I like it. You plugging away. Speaking of plugging away, if you have not subscribed to Tony's channel, please do that. Go subscribe. He's got some really cool stuff. Even if you're not in the market for a commercial system, some of your stuff is really good. Like I love the video you did where you're like, let me show you what dew point is, and you do these really simple science, almost like a 6th grade science test to prove what some of these things are. And I was like, man, this is like gold. Like, I don't know. It was just really good.
Yeah, we like to keep it's HVAC TV on YouTube. HVAC-TV is the YouTube stuff. And we like to keep it simple. And you'd be surprised how many, commercial mechanical engineers have been around a while, including myself. If I get away from it, I need to relearn the basics all the time. So that's why we focus on a lot of that stuff. So
that's a good point. Yep. You get a little rusty sometimes.
For sure. I know I do.
As we wrap up, guys, we've got another question or two here with Tony, but as we wrap up, if we've talked tonight about some of the bad apples in our industry, right? If you know a good electrician, plumber, or HVAC company, please drop the name of them in the chat, show them some love, share where they're located. And you never know when someone else in our chat just might see that message and you can really show them some love. So as we're wrapping up, Tony, what's your final thoughts here? What's that final piece of wisdom that you can throw at folks and, you know, really just knock their socks off here?
Oh man, no pressure, right?
No pressure.
Let me look up something online so I could sound smarter. Hold on, let me get my phone.
Yeah, go to Chat GPT real quick.
I don't know. First of all, thank you for having me. This has been really a lot of fun for me. I'm actually honored to be on here. It's one of these fruits of doing this online stuff. I get to meet new people and get to have these conversations. And at some point, I'm sure we'll meet in person and we'll have some fun then too. But I don't know. I just say if you're a homeowner, like take your time, vet out the installer properly. And, for those of us in the HVAC community, do what you can to give back. Let's rise up as a team. Let's not beat each other down. And the way we do that is by giving back and by bringing value to us as coworkers, especially when new guys are starting out. So, that would be that would be any wisdom I have. That would be it there. Help others, because I know I need all the help I can get, and I've got a lot of help in my career, and I want to give some of that back. So,
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Well, again, if you haven't subscribed to Tony's channel, please go do that. We will be back next Tuesday night at the same time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 Central. Next week's guest is actually kind of famous in our industry. I think she might be one of the more famous guests that I've had on my show. Anybody that knows anything about HVAC has seen her face at least somewhere, and I'm excited to have her on. So that's my little teaser. Make sure you're here next Saturday night. And on Saturday morning, I told a few of you guys already, we will do our traditional Q&A show that, we haven't been able to do because we've been having so many awesome guests on. So if you do have a question you've been sitting on and you want to get that answered, make sure you're here on Saturday morning. I don't have an exact time because, Saturday mornings are sometimes crazy, right? So anyway, thanks again, Tony. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully, we can have you on again in the future, and I really appreciate you coming on.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
I like it. Guys, we'll see you next week, next Tuesday night. In the meantime, make it a great week. Take